Okay, so the recording has started. I'll hand over briefly to the chair so that he can introduce the subcommittee. Oh, sorry. Just before we do that, I'll take nominations for chair.
Nominate Reg Rice.
Yeah. I'll second that.
Nominate Reg Rice.
Yeah. And I'll second that.
Okay, that's fine. The chair is agreed. That's Councillor Rice.
Okay, in that case, I'll hand over to the chair, Councillor Rice, and we'll deal with the upcoming issues in a second. But yes, Councillor Rice, if you'd like to introduce the committee.
There's feedback coming through. Can you not hear it?
Yeah, so if people could turn off their microphones.
That's better. My name is Councillor Reg Rice. I'm chairing this meeting this evening. Can I ask officers
sorry, Chair, there's still some feedback. Can everyone just make sure they've turned off their microphones?
Can you hear now?
Okay, Councillor Rice, if you'd like to start with the introductions to the...
Good evening, I'm Reg Rice. I'm chairing this meeting this evening. Can I ask my colleagues to introduce themselves, starting with councillors? Councillor Gounis? Councillor Gounis, can you hear?
I can hear you, but the background noise is really bad. I'm Councillor Makbule Gounis. I'm one of the South Tottenham councillors, but also a member of this committee. Thank you.
Councillor Da Costa.
Thank you. I'm Councillor Da Costa, member for Highgate Ward. I think I've managed to figure out mute the person who was causing the echo.
Do you want to invite the parties to introduce themselves?
So it should just officers quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll get to the parties.
I'm Michelle Williams. I'm the legal advisor.
I'm Dale Barrett. I'm the licensing team leader.
Naz, are you going to introduce yourself? Is Naz frozen?
Yeah, he's frozen. I'll introduce him. It's Naz Chowdhury. He is the Democratic Services Officer supporting the meeting. My name is Aisha Simzek. I'm the Democratic Services Manager, also helping out with the meeting.
Yes, okay. So, yes, my camera froze there for a second. So, as I understand it, we have a fair few attendees for this meeting. Can I ask very quickly if we have any designated speakers, or if someone is intending to speak at this meeting tonight? If you could put your hands up, that would be fine. So we've got Chloe O'Brien. Carrie, I've got someone named Carrie. I might need to ask you if yes, we've got the applicant. So Mr. Colvin, I do see you, and we've got Gio. Okay, so those are your speakers, I think. So we've got our resident speakers, Chloe O'Brien, Councillor Dunstall. Carrie and Gio, can I please have your names in full?
My
Carrie,
surname's
do you wanna-
Anker, A-N-K-E-R. Yeah, did you hear that?
Yeah, we did. Thank you.
Okay.
And Gio, hi Gio, if you can let us know your surname. Sorry, you're on mute, Gio.
Yotzi, I-O-Z-Z-I.
Oh, yeah. Okay, we've just got one more guest joining. Just one moment. Councillor Dunstall, have you got a query?
No,
I think
sorry,
we've got you
my hand's up
registered.
for speaking,
Yeah, no problem. That's fine. We've got you registered as well.
Okay, so I count. Hello, Jerry Tinman. Have you put your hand up for a particular reason there? You're on mute.
I'd like to speak. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We've just noted your name as well for speaking. Thank you.
Okay, so I count 5 speakers there. So obviously we have the applicant with us, Mr. Colvin, who is the applicant's representative. So Mr. Colvin, for your presentation, how long do you think you might need to speak?
Well, I received a message yesterday saying that I was permitted 5 minutes, so I've religiously prepared 5 minutes. That's how long I'd like, please.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, in that case then, all the objectors, everyone is entitled to 5 minutes speaking time. Okay, in that case, I think that's the speaker's arrangement resolved. Yeah. Okay, so just for the
recap
for the applicants, Mr. Colvin KC, and we've got for the objectors, Councillor Dunstall, Miss Carrie Ankle, Giovanni Yotzi, Chloe O'Brien, and Jerry Timlin. Okay, so in that case, then what I'll do is I'll hand back to the chair, and he can move on to the first standing item, which is filming at meetings and so forth. So, Councillor Rice, if I can hand over to you.
Councillor Rice, you're unmuted. You're muted. Do you want to open your microphone?
Is it still muted there?
No, you're fine. Thank you.
Please note that this meeting may be filmed or recorded by the council for live or subsequent broadcast via the council's internet site or by anyone attending the meeting. Item 2, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies?
There are no apologies, Chair. All members are present.
Thank you. Are there any urgent items of business?
None registered, Chair.
Declaration of interest. Members, have you got any interest to declare?
None to declare.
Yeah, none to be declared.
A question of how we approach this meeting. I just give a brief summary of the procedure which we intend to adopt. The procedure for the meeting has been emailed to all participants by the clerk. For the purpose of any member of the public watching, we will first set out a brief outline of the procedure. Firstly, the licensed officer should put the case for the committee to the committee. Then the objectors and members of the subcommittee would have an opportunity to ask questions. Then the objectors with those present make their representation to the subcommittee, and the applicant will have the opportunity to ask questions. All parties will then have the opportunity to sum up, and then the meeting will conclude to allow the subcommittee to deliberate and reach a decision. Please note, this decision will probably take 5 days before it's published. Are there any queries on that? Now, this is an application for a variation of an existing premises license for Cranbrook Brothers at Finsbury Park, London N4. Can I ask Ms. Barrett, licensing officer of the council, to introduce the report, please? Ms. Barrett?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Okay, so the committee have before them this evening 2 applications. So it's 2 variation applications, Chair, and I think in the interest of time, if I put the 2 together and present both at this time, Chair, and therefore allow for more time for the conversation to be had, for that discussion to be had about what's been varied.
Just a minute, can I ask the applicant whether they're comfortable with this, they're satisfied with that? Is that agreed?
Yeah, we actually suggested it, so it's the same site, same applicant, same objectors. It seems really sensible to roll these together.
Thanks.
Definitely.
And there's one other point before we move on with your question. Can I ask Michelle Williams to give the legal advice which she gave to me much earlier on in respect of matters which we intend to discuss? Ms. Williams?
Yes, Chair.
Please give your advice.
Yes, Chair. I just wanted to remind the committee that this is an application for a variation of an existing premises licence. It's not a review, and the committee is therefore only able to consider the impact of the variation on the licensing objectives, i.e. the impact of the larger capacity and the 1 extra event day, not the premises licence more widely. And Chair, many concerns have been raised regarding environmental and ecological issues in the written representations, but the committee is not permitted under the Licensing Act to consider those issues, and if you did, it could result in a ground for challenging your decision. So I therefore advise, Chair, that those speaking tonight be asked not to address you on those issues, but to limit their representations to the 4 licensing objectives.
Thank you very much, sir. Right, Ms. Barrett, could you carry on with your presentation?
Certainly, Chair. So the committee have before them the application submitted by Crank Brothers. So both for variations. So application 1 is seeking to increase the original Crank Brothers premises license, increase the capacity to 9999 persons. And application 2, which is for the Friday, is seeking to add an additional Friday, so to make that so in order to have events running Friday to Sunday on 2 weekends of the year, and to also increase the capacity on that license to 9999. The LSE will note, please, on a copy on the secondary license, that's the license at the back of the back, Chair, you will see that it states 4 events per calendar year on the original premises license, and that decision for the particular Friday license, if you look further in the documentation, you will see the LSC, the licensing subcommittee's resolution for that, which permitted 1 Friday. So hence the reason now this variation is seeking a 2nd Friday and the increase in hours, Chair. The applications submitted were accompanied by an operating schedule, Chair, which was in fact amplifying the existing measures that the organiser puts in place. They're not adding new conditions, Chair. The existing licenses have around 50 conditions on them already. So what you're seeing in the variation application, Chair, is really an explanation as to how those conditions are actually put into practice for the events, Chair. There is also a site plan attached to the application, which shows a slightly larger space than the site plan you'll see on the existing premises licenses. With the request for the increased capacity, it does also mean that the increased area of the park would be required for these events. There is the plan on page 21, if you've got the ordinary, the posted bundle of the papers of the report document. And on page 23, there is an overview of Finsbury Park itself. There's an overview plan of Finsbury Park itself, and you'll see that darkened area near the top, which shows the event space. So this gives the committee an overview of the area of the park that would be utilised. The remainder of the park would remain open and accessible throughout the period. I am advised by the Park Service that last year, the area that was used equated to 5% of the park, and what is now proposed is a 2% increase on that to make that to 7% overall use of the park. Should members be happy with that? Both applications underwent the 28 days consultation, during which time the licensing authority received no representations from any responsible authorities at all on either of the applications. There are, however, 55 representations from members of the public against the applications, and the main areas of concerns are quite wide-ranging. They range from denying, some of them state denying local children access to green space and their ability to exercise, public nuisance emanating from the events. There are figures for the events and so forth, but I do have the figures myself, Chair, if the panel wish to be aware of them. The loss of the community facility over the summer months. Some cited an increase in crime and disorder in ASB in the park and surrounding areas whilst the event was taking place. Some cited concerns of unsafe and overcrowding at the stations and the impact on transport, drug dealing and the sale of NOS gas, public urination by attendees, and concerns raised about environmental impact and so forth. Obviously, the LSC are reminded that there are matters that's not within their remit. And they would be matters such as views on whether or not the park should be used for events at all, access to the park on the run-up, during and after the event days, the income generated from the event and what it is used for, the cleansing of the park in general terms, or any potential for damage to the trees and grass and so forth. Those matters are really covered under the parks policy and dealt with as part of the hire process also. Crank Brothers, in response to the various matters raised against their application, have submitted a bundle for the committee's attention. And I'm sure Mr. Colvin will take you through that bundle, but in effect, there is a witness statement from Mr. Clancy, information within the pack from Vanguardia, who are the noise team that's contracted. There is also a summary from their security advisor also. There's a copy of the residence leaflet and the proof of delivery of those leaflets for last year. And as part of the process, as part of the separate parks process for last year's event, there has been residence meetings with Crank Brothers, and those minutes have also been included in the submitted bundle, Chair. Within the pack also, Chair, at the back of that submitted bundle, there are emails from the police events team for Haringey, and also from the TfL Underground Events Officer. The correspondence from the police sets out the crime stats for the event period for 2023, and some follow-up correspondence between themselves and Mr. Clancy. And the TfL email acknowledged that the event took place last year and there were no issues or concerns raised, and the increase in numbers now being sought will not impact the tube services. The TfL officer also submitted some information of engineering works, which is useful because obviously for anyone planning events, so as a council and for the event organisers, they would know what they needed to consider in their event management plan also, Chair. Chair, I hope that's a quick overview of the applications before you this evening. And I think I'm able to leave it there, Chair, if you have any questions for me.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barrett. Do any members want to ask any questions? Questions from members, please.
Thank you, Chair. One clarification and one question. Regarding 1.4, you state previously it was a 5% usage of the park space and now a 7%, but an increase from 5 to 7 is a 40% increase rather than a 2% increase. That's more just for clarification of the space being used.
Thank you, Chair. I was just quoting from what my colleagues in Parks had sent through to me. Thank you.
No, I assumed that was the case. Don't worry about it. And then the second question is with regards to an objection from residents on Connaught Road. Now, of course, objections, etc., were rightly redacted for confidentiality reasons. But page 57 to 58 is a number of residents from Connaught Road. Can you confirm how many residents that was? Because it seems that their names might have been listed on the original and then they've been redacted, just so I can keep my numbers in tally.
Okay, can I just access the document and I can come back to you to let you know?
Of course.
I'll access the original. Thank you.
Thank you, Dahlia.
Any other questions from members? Are there any questions from objectors?
Sorry, Chair, just that really quick clarification from me. I wanted to ask that in terms of so my understanding from reading the documents, we're talking about only one Friday. So one Friday was already granted, but it's 1 day extension to the events that's been proposed.
It's an additional Friday, so there'll be 2 Fridays.
So it's an additional Friday.
It's an additional one.
And it's additional, obviously, 2,000 people more. Okay, thank you for that clarity. My other question is kind of in terms of the resources, extra resources that are needed to make sure the event is running smoothly, like the toilet facilities were mentioned, and what kind of measures are put in place to make sure that it will be a smoothly kind of delivered event.
So any organizer knows, and there is also it used to be the purple guide. It's no longer the purple guide. There's an event safety guide that sets out infrastructure requirements, should I say, for events. So how many toilets and the ratio of toilets and how many disabled toilets will be required and that sort of thing. Even down to how many, your number of medical staff that will be required, depending on the size of the event capacity and that sort of thing. So there are industry standards that the organizer would meet and in fact probably provide more of rather than just meeting that standard.
Any questions from objectors? Are there any questions from the applicant?
Chair, there's a question from one of the objectors.
Yeah, what is it?
Is Gio, do you want to put your, you can speak and put your microphone on?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me? Thank you. I just wanted to ask just a kind of a question about the process of which points you hear as a committee, like, and why are we not allowed to raise issues about the environment when the MKA ecology report from 2021 states clearly that this festival causes high physical damage to the area? So why are you excluding environmental, very powerful, strong environmental concerns?
Should I answer that, Chair?
Yes, please, Michelle.
The Licensing Act sets out the issues that the committee can consider when determining a licensing application, and those issues relate to 4 licensing objectives, and ecology and those sorts of issues are not part of the licensing objectives, and for that reason that can't form part of the licensing committee's reasoning. But Ms Barrett has said that the council does
Sorry, I've lost you. Hello?
Michelle, sorry, you've gone off. We can't hear you.
Gone off. Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, so the council does consider those ecological issues, but that's as part of the parts policy, not as part of the licensing process. And that's because the Licensing Act 2003 doesn't allow members to consider those issues. They're restricted to the 4 licensing objectives.
I suggest it's updated.
Well, it's Parliament that, you know, determines what the members can consider. So that's something that obviously you could petition on, but it's not something that we've got the power to update ourselves. Those powers rest with Parliament.
But you don't have to always interpret central statute legislation, do you? As a council, you have a certain amount of autonomy.
To consider issues that are outside of the remit of the Act would actually be irrelevant considerations and would make any decisions by the licensing committee open to challenge if they were taking into account irrelevant factors, and those would be one of them.
Okay, thank you for that.
And Chair, there are a couple more objectors that want to speak. So there's Jerry Timlin.
This is not just to speak, this is to ask questions.
Ask questions, yeah. Apologies. Ask questions.
There are questions to be asked.
And these are questions to the licensing officer, Chair, not just general questions.
Yes, it's a question to the licensing officer. Again, just reiterating what Gio has said. That
what is the question?
The impact on the natural environment in which the...
Sorry, Chair.
Can you hear me?
Sorry, Chair. If it's going to be, if it's just regarding that same matter again, then really and truly, you do probably need to move on, Chair, and I can give a response back to Councillor Da Costa's question, Chair, about how many was on that particular representation he'd asked.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to know more about that. I've lost my voice, but the natural environment has to be taken into account. It's not a pub, it's not an event space, it's a park.
The licensing officer of the council said she write to you about it. So you wait for that correspondence.
I would like clarification, please.
Sorry?
Sorry, Chair, there is no further clarification over and above what Ms Williams has already provided around that particular issue.
Right, okay. Thank you for that. Look, now can we hear from the applicant? Mr. Corbett?
Chair, I think there is another
Chair, yeah.
objector question. Bethany Anderson.
Hi.
Go on.
Bethany, you're on mute again. Apologies, you're on mute.
Sorry. Hi, thank you. I was wondering if in the 7% of space that the event is taking up, is the carriageway included in that? Because the carriageway is full for the 5 days, at least 5 days build up, and then again for the breakdown. Is that included in the 7%?
Yes, there is a carriageway that is included in the space.
The whole
that this event.
whole carriageway is included.
I wouldn't say the whole carriageway, no, but
Okay.
part of it would be caught in this event space.
Because obviously the whole carriageway is taken up during the build-up and the breakdown, so I think maybe that needs to be thought about being included, the whole of the carriageway.
Right.
Okay, sorry, Chair, I've got nothing further to add. As I said, it's only, as far as I'm aware, part of the carriageway would be taken up.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, could we have the
Sorry,
applicant?
Chair, can I just come back on Councillor Da Costa's question, please? Councillor Da Costa, that was 14, so 15 residents in all on that particular representation you've asked about. And some of them have also made their own reps as well in the pack, looking at the names.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
All right.
Okay.
Mr. Culver, would you like to present your applicant's case, please?
Thank you very much indeed, sir. Councillors, I know you've pre-read these papers, but for your reference, I'm just going to list the papers which form the core of our case. Firstly, our existing licences with their 50 conditions governing these events, for which you might want to look at pages 130 to 133. The promises in our operating schedule, see pages 15 to 17. My skeleton argument, which is in your supplemental papers, our evidence, which is at pages 110 to 124 and 147 to 163, and support for these variations by the police and Transport for London, which are 165 to 169. I hope these papers demonstrate to you the professionalism of my client's team and its deep commitment to run these events safely and compliantly and to respond in a responsible manner to matters raised by members of the community. I can't improve on that material in the 5 minutes I've got, so I'm just going to make 6 short points. First, the application just involves increasing the capacity from 8,000 to 9,999 and adding one Friday to the first weekend of programming. It involves no increase in noise levels, no increase in hours, still finishing at 10 o'clock and 9:30 on Sunday, no increase in the overall time on site, and no change in licensable activities or other conditions. Second, no professional person, whether contracted to my client or working for any authority advising your subcommittee, has any issue with these variations. That is still more important here because the authorities actively engage with my client on the SAG and know the impact of the event because they are present observing it. Third, there is a triple level of control. 1, my client is not even given the right to use the park unless the council is satisfied with it as a tenant, including in matters of ecology and so forth. 2, you control the licence and its 50 conditions. And 3, the SAG controls the event plan. Indeed, under the licence, the event can't run unless the SAG signs off the event plan, which covers all aspects of the event so as to promote the licensing objectives. It's a highly professional SAG led by Miss Barrett and to which my client is answerable. 4. So far as crime and disorder is concerned, you've seen that the police are fully satisfied with my client's measures and its very low levels of crime, and you've also seen SHOSEC explaining that it is a mature, well-behaved and compliant crowd. 5, as for noise, as I've said, there will be no increase in noise level. So in this respect, the only matter concerning you is the extra day at the same level as all the other days. My client works with the leading acoustic consultant nationally, Vanguardia, and you have their detailed account of how they approach their task. Noise levels are set by the SAG to hold the balance between enjoyment of the event and protection of the community. Vanguardia controls sound production and they stick religiously to the level set. Inevitably, those levels do not please everybody, particularly perhaps those who are not well disposed to the event, and you'll be hearing from some of those good people. But the levels are set by your expert officers using their extensive professional experience and judgment. My client respects those levels and goes to great lengths not only to comply with them, but to respond to each and every complaint made. And sixth and finally, you've heard that a number of things which have been said, in fact, a significant part of these objections are simply irrelevant. But this is not to say that my client is not concerned with community engagement. It's deeply committed to that. And as a result, it employs a dedicated ecology consultant to work with the council's park team. It works to ensure continued accessibility through the park, laying tracks to the south and southeast of the site and floodlighting the north along the new river. It significantly upscaled its facilities for disabled attendees. And of course, it gives away 500 free tickets to local people. It does know these events do not please everyone, but it continues to work hard to assuage concerns as far as it can. But having said that, I must conclude by submitting there's no real evidence that these changes will fail to promote the licensing objectives, and so I respectfully ask you to grant this application.
Thank you, Mr. Colville. Members, do you have any questions to put to Mr. Colville?
Yes, Chair, if I may.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Colvin, for your application. Can I get a couple of items of clarification? Why have you chosen the cap of 9999?
I don't know why 10,000 wasn't chosen. There might be a reason for that. I will ask on WhatsApp and see if I can get an answer.
Excellent. And the 9999 cap, do you know if it applies to guests, i.e. attendees only, or does that include staff, acts, security, etc.?
Again, I'll check for you, sir.
Okay. With regards to the noise complaints, Vanguard mentioned that there was a spike in noise complaints on the first day and then did some attributing towards wind direction. I haven't seen anywhere in the pack, and apologies if I've missed it, but how many noise complaints did Vanguard receive over previous events?
Again, I might be corrected, but I think it was 60 which came through the community hotline, of which the vast majority came on the first day. And I think what they said was there was wind changing around on the first day in an unusual way. And so people who would normally not hear anything began to hear things and so made complaints. And then the complaints fell off quite vertiginously after the first day.
Thank you for that.
Oh, I'm just being told, sir, I'm just giving you the answers. They come in 9999 as a cost band, and it includes everyone on site, including security, etc.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. In a couple of the residents' objections, it mentioned that reporting was making noise reports was quite difficult, and there wasn't a sort of dedicated reporting section on the event website. With regards to you mentioned in the witness statement and in the information from SHOSEC, from Vanguard, apologies, it mentions that there are sort of reporting hotlines. Are residents able to report directly via the website rather than calling or sending an email? Do you know?
I don't know about specifically by the website. I'll check on that. I know that email address is in the residents' letter, and it's on the website apparently year round, and so residents can very simply complain via email. So far as the residents' hotline is concerned, I did note in Vanguard, you might have noted as well, that if a resident rang through when somebody else was simultaneously trying to ring through, they might have had a short wait. But given that there was only 60 complaints in all, even if that was only over one day, but in fact this was over 5 days, it would seem quite surprising if people persistently couldn't get through. But if there is an issue about that, that's precisely the sort of thing which can be picked up on the Safety Advisory Group, and maybe it should be. Maybe you could even ask that it is. And if there needs to be a second line, someone's going to have a mobile handy or something. We want people to be able to get through. My client has a dedicated team. So if somebody gets through and says, look, it's noisy, they're then asked, would you like us to come out? If they say, yes, we want you to come out, Vanguardia come out and they take a measurement at their house. So no one's trying to hide away from these issues. My client wants to deal with them and wants to sort them out.
Thank you. Paragraph 15 of the witness statement states that the increase can be managed without undue impact, and then specifies, as you mentioned in your statement, about there's no additional noise elements. But we are looking at an increase of I was going to say 2,000, but technically 1,999 people.
Yes.
Can one really argue that there would be no undue additional impact with such a large increase of attendees, aside from the fact that you said there's no additional noise, but it's still, a significant increase in number of attendees?
Yeah, I think probably what's being said there is that there's not only ample capacity in the general environment, but there's ample capacity even in the existing site to take those extra 2,000 people. There's a larger site because a concern had been expressed on ecological matters, and my client, working with the SAG and also the council's ecology officer, has expanded the perimeter of the site, which means that more of the infrastructure can be taken away from the central carriageway, where there's some very lovely old plane trees. So there's perfectly ample room on the site. And then all the infrastructure increases commensurately, the toilets, the medical provision, the security and so forth, and the detail of all of that is then worked through the SAG. So you could say there's 2,000 extra people coming and 2,000 extra people leaving. Is the police resource and the security resource adequate to handle that? Yes, because there's security all the way to the stations. WC provision is put out on the central carriageway all the way up to the perimeter of the park. And can the TfL handle it? Yes, they've told us they can. Is the level of crime placing an undue pressure on the Met Police? No, the level of crime is absolutely trivial. Is this somehow undue or untoward in the context of Finsbury Park as a whole? No. See Wireless, which has a capacity of 50,000 people rather than 10,000 people, or see any Arsenal game at home. I believe they attract some crowds at the Emirates these days. So the answer to the question is no. I mean, it's a large percentage increase. It's 25% or just under 25%. But there's simply no respect in which that's going to place such a burden on any kind of infrastructure that the licensing objectives are going to fail to be met.
Thank you very much, Chair. That's all the questions for me for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on detail from any other members of the audience?
I don't know if Councillor Guinness has got any questions, but there's a few public objectives that are wanting to put forward questions.
Sorry, Ash, if we could just go one at a time.
Yep.
So I think we'll have to take questions from members first, then we can take questions from any residents.
Yep.
Just a minute. Let's finish off this questioning to the applicant, and then we move on to contributions from the objectors. Are there any other questions to the applicant from members of the public?
So I can see Chloe O'Brien's got her hand up.
Right. Is there a question, Ms. O'Brien?
Yeah, it's a question for the applicant. In the papers, it contained, I think, in a letter from the police, they stated that they received a bomb threat during one of the events last year. I wouldn't think that the Met would consider that to be trivial. So I was wondering how you were able to categorise it as such and proceed on the basis that there was no threat to public safety.
Well, there wasn't an actual threat to public safety because there was no bomb, and the Met Police didn't think there was any threat. It was somebody with a hoax call. Of course, one doesn't want that to happen, but it's not something which concerned the Met, and if the Met had a concern in relation to crime and disorder, they would have made a representation in relation to this application. And actually, when we didn't receive a rep from the Met Police, we actually went out and hunted the Met Police down to say, look, have you got any issue with this increase at all? And they've said, no, they haven't. And they've given you all the figures there.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Mr. Calderville. Are there any other questions from the public?
I can see a lady with Carrie. Have you got a question?
Yeah, well, a sort of question. You mentioned that there was no increase in noise. Got sort of 2 points on that, really. One, another whole day is an increase in noise. It's another, 10 or whatever hours of noise that local people have to put up with. So that should be taken into consideration. And also, I think it was 2 years ago that I called the noise people out. I don't know if it's the same company. And they came round, and the guy that came, he took the measurement, and it was within the permitted levels. But he said, I don't know how you put up with this. It's too loud for the peaceful enjoyment of your home. I don't know why they keep the levels so high. So I guess I would ask, why are the levels so high? Allowed to be so high?
Okay, so on the first part of your question, what I was actually saying and was trying to convey was that the extra people coming to site does not imply any increase in noise levels at all. There will be no increase in the levels. Of course, there will be one more night on which this event occurs, but it will occur at exactly the same noise levels as all the other nights. So far as the levels of noise, I can't speak for what you've heard. I've no idea. I don't think it's in your representation, so it's not something that I would have been able to check with Vanguardia. I have to say it's a rather remarkable thing to say from that you're reporting. So I'm not sure that it was Vanguardia who were saying what you're reporting, but the noise levels are very, very sensitively set and calibrated by Haringey's noise officers. They're not invented by my client. In some sites, there's just a crude level which is taken. It mustn't exceed, I'm just simplifying, X decibels. Whereas in the case of Crank Brothers, what the council officers do is they go around the neighbouring streets and assess the background noise levels, and then they set a level for that street in comparison to the background noise levels. So if you happen to live on a quieter street, then the acceptable noise level for that street is set lower than if you live on a more noisy street where noise may be drowned out by traffic and so forth. All those levels have been worked out very carefully over the years by the officers who've got years and years of experience of monitoring and setting noise levels for outdoor music events in Finsbury Park. They're reviewed every year. The SAG is aware of complaints which have been made. They're carefully looked at, and if there are issues where people are suffering undue noise in their homes, then they really need to call Vanguardia and call the council and see if those levels ought to be reviewed. But so far, the council has been very happy with the noise levels which it has set. It's monitored. They're in the room with Vanguardia. They're out there at the monitoring positions with my client. So I'm really sorry for what you've said you've experienced, but these levels have been set by the experts on this topic.
Do any of these experts who set these noise limits live within earshot of the events in Finsbury Park? I would suggest no, but.
Well, I couldn't help you on that, but what I can help you on is that there, and the Friends of Finsbury Park know this actually, there's codes of practice which deal with acceptable noise levels. And so the officers aren't just sort of making it up as they go along. They're using well-tested criteria for noise levels in exactly this sort of situation, where there are outdoor music events taking place in public parks, which are surrounded by residential areas. And London actually is one of the main cities in the world where these sorts of events take place. So there's a great deal of knowledge that's built up. There's nothing unusual about Finsbury Park in terms of the levels which this council has accepted. You could go around all the parks in London and find a sort of commonality. Finsbury Park is probably more protective than most of the parks in London, from my own experience.
Thank you. Is that the end of the
Chair,
question?
there's a couple more. Yeah, there's a couple more.
That's his question.
Jerry Timlin is next, I think.
Thank you. I would like to, I mean, there's a lot of talk about noise and noise monitoring, but in fact, last year we experienced also vibrational impact, where items were falling off shelves in the surrounding properties, and that, I mean, that's very worrying in an area where there's already issues of subsidence. I mean, who do we claim to for damage to property? Is that something the council are looking at? Are they monitoring vibration and how that's affecting property?
Have you reported it to the council?
I'm very happy to answer questions about vibration because it's dealt with by Vanguardia in their statement. What they report is that the vibration from music poses really no structural issue at all on this site, or indeed any site around London. And I think they deal with probably most of the big festivals, as well as many of the small festivals around the capital, and more widespread. And so they're particular experts on the subject of vibration. What they have found in other parks is that when you've got either pyrotechnics or headline acts who are quite dynamic in the way they sort of promote dancing in relation to the crowd, so the crowd itself is moving in unison. It has come across cases where for short periods, vibrations just from people jumping are causing a level of dynamic response in local buildings. And they've analysed this, scientifically analysed this, literally using scientific calibration. And what they have discovered from that is that there's no case where buildings have moved in such a way that they get to levels where any kind of structural damage, including even hairline cracking to plaster, is liable to happen. What they've said about Crank Brothers is because it's electronic music, so it's DJ led. It's not the kind of music which is giving rise to those sorts of issues in any case. And Madam, what I'd say to you is if really you're experiencing anything like what you've just said, it's really important that you use a complaints line, because you've got probably the premier company in the country, if not the world, there. And if you've got things falling off tables, I know they'd love to see it, because it would be scientifically very interesting.
If I may, sorry to interrupt you, my neighbour reported this and received the response that in fact there was no sound monitoring last year, but they would take it under review. He has video evidence, he has reported it, and as I say, the response was that the sound levels were not monitored last year. Okay. I mean, if I may move on from that for a moment.
Sorry, if you're asking that as a question, I need to answer it. If that is what your neighbour is saying to you, madam, then you really are going to have to go back to your neighbour, because either you misheard or it's just not true. Vanguardia were on site and off site last year, as council officers will verify, monitoring on site and off site and responding to noise complaints. I think they would take it really amiss for it to be suggested against them that they weren't monitoring at all. It's what they're hired to do.
I've actually seen the email response from the council admitting that there was no sound monitoring in 2023. So I have to take the council's word for that. If I may move on, another issue I have is these events go on in the height of summer, where we've already got last year summers with 40 degrees centigrade, and we need some access. We need to be able to keep our windows open, especially in the evenings, to get cooler air in. And that's not possible when you've got pounding noise entering your home, especially if there's little children who need to get to sleep, or shift workers. I mean, it's very oppressive, and it has the potential to be even more oppressive.
Okay. Can I just come back to your previous question? I wonder whether what your neighbour might have been saying was that the council's own environmental health officers weren't monitoring last year. I can't say whether that's so or not, but they were present while Vanguardia was doing its work on site. And so we were able to review what Vanguardia are doing. And of course, everything Vanguardia do is open and transparent so the council can see it. Can I say, in relation to the point you make about open windows, it's certainly true that most festivals take place over the period May to September, which are the summer months. And so the noise levels are set in cognizance of the fact that some people will have their windows open at some times. But again, this comes back to the levels which are set by the Safety Advisory Group, having regard to their own professional experience.
Thank you. Any more questions?
No, I'll leave it there for others.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So should we leave it there? And
I think there's a couple more people with their hands up. So I think Gio was next to ask questions.
No, I've got a long list of things that people want to contribute.
Can I ask a question, please? Is that possible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask the committee, if you approve this expansion variation, would this lead directly to increased income for the council?
I think the question has to be to the applicant at this stage. The question is directed at the applicant at this stage of the meeting.
Okay, well, can it be reserved to be directed at the whoever it's appropriate for, the committee? Is there going to be a chance for it to be?
No, the questions are direct.
Okay, one at a time,
Chair,
please.
it's Miss Barrett here. Chair,
Yeah.
Can I answer that? In
Yes.
terms of the licence fee is set by central government, so not locally set by Haringey, and the applicant is required to pay the licence fee for the application and will pay according to the capacity. So there was a question earlier, I think from Councillor Da Costa, about why 9999. At 99999, the fee set is 1,100, and when you get to 10,000 and up, it then goes up to 2,000 whatever. And it's actually, you can just Google the regulations, Licensing Act 2003 regulations for the fees that are set by that. But that's all there is in relation to the licensing aspect.
But is this going to lead to increased income for the council if you approve this? That's my question.
It's not, yeah, like I said in the report I presented, the fees income from that may be generated by the council or other services is not relevant to this particular committee.
Okay, thank you for that. So we've got a long list of people who want to contribute, and I want to begin to do this as the night is drawing on. So we move on to people who want to make representations, and ask Councillor George Dunstall to make his contribution. George? Where's he got to? I saw him there a minute ago. George?
Sorry, yeah, I couldn't hear you properly, Reg. Yeah, I'm thanking you for the opportunity to speak. I guess first thing to say is that I'm providing this representation on behalf of myself and my Stroud Green colleagues, councillors Worrell and Culverwell, as well as Haringey ward councillors, Councillor Abella and Brabazon, in their capacity as ward councillors. So I guess the crux of my objections with regard to this submission for yet further capacity and an additional day focuses on the issues of public safety and public nuisance. The incremental increase in size and number of the Crank Brother events raises significant concerns with regard to the ongoing and increasing public nuisance that these events cause and the detrimental impact they have on local residents and park users, both in terms of those wishing to use the park and those living close to the park. This latest submission proposes a 25% capacity increase to 9,999, which we've just heard doesn't quite tip them into major event categories, but is clearly quite a large event. And also the additional day. This would amount to an additional 20,000 attendees over the period. When these events started in 2018, they were around 3,000 capacity and over 2 days. They've seen a gradual increase in capacity and expansion and in the number of days they take up. And this application, if successful, would take them one attendee short of being a major event. I appreciate there are numerous licensing conditions intended to mitigate the impact and nuisance of these, but at what point do we step back and consider that actually this incremental increase in nuisance caused to local residents and park users over time has reached an intolerable level? These events, whilst I'm sure professionally managed, are not without complaint. Residents report that issues of noise is a major disruption to them enjoying their homes peacefully, using their garden if they're fortunate enough to have one, and using the park at all over the period that they are going on. The complaints we received in regard to noise were predominantly, as highlighted earlier, regard to noise. 62, I believe, feels like a disproportionate amount of noise nuisance given the comparatively small size of the events being held. Given they've already caused significant and increasing encroachment on park users and residents during their expansion to date, I feel that increasing the capacity further still and adding an additional day is an unnecessary addition of significant and further detriment to local residents and would constitute an unfair level of public nuisance without clear and tangible local benefit. Public safety is a further consideration. We've received a number of complaints with regard there being insufficient toilet facilities at the site in 2023, resulting in attendees simply urinating against trees near the toilet facilities. It's not clear in what ways this has been addressed in this application. Furthermore, it appears that it was an issue previously and more toilets were installed, yet it was reported to us last year as still being an issue. This application proposes an increase in space from 5% to 7% of the whole park. The proposed expansion to the perimeter raises further issues of public nuisance in regard to yet more of the park being taken over for these events at the expense of park users and residents. In conclusion, the proposed expansion and additional day feels like an unnecessary addition to an already large event that can accommodate 8,000 attendees per day. The application appears to provide significant gains to the applicant, significant additional ticket sales being just one, whilst not providing any tangible benefit to the local community, subjecting residents to yet more disruption and nuisance over the most popular summer period. I urge the committee to consider this application in that context, that there is simply no need for the expansion and no tangible benefit to anyone aside from the applicant that I can see. They have 5 event days already, 8,000 attendees at each, 5% at the park. We have an obligation to strike a balance with these issues and these events, and this is an opportunity to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next name on my list is Bronwyn Field.
Sorry, Chair. It's Miss Kerry Ankle is the next speaker who is.
Have you got the one I have?
Yeah. So we had the speakers with their hand up at the start of the meeting. So the next speaker is Kerry Ankle. So I think Kerry, if you want to proceed.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Basically, what George has just said is pretty much everything that I was going to say, but he actually said it better than me. But I guess what I would just add to that is I looked up the definition of public nuisance, and it's one of the definitions, well, the first one that came up was something that interferes with the rights of the general public. And then on a legal side, it came up with it obstructs the public in the exercise or enjoyment of the rights common to all. And this event does definitely cause public nuisance on both of the, with both of those definitions. And an extra day, an extra capacity will impact on that, particularly the noise of an extra day. And I think anyone who doesn't live within earshot cannot imagine what it's like having two consecutive weekends, potentially now 3 days of each of those weekends, that noise going on, and it affects your enjoyment of the park, your enjoyment of your home, your enjoyment of your garden. It affects your mental health, the stress of it, and not being able to get away from it. Personally, I try and go away as much as I can. That's why most probably your noise complaints are down, because I'm not around that much. It's because in previous years it's driven me mad. I was here, I had COVID 1 year and couldn't go away, and I just thought, oh my God, for people who are stuck in their homes for whatever reason, it's totally unbearable. So an extra day will have a huge impact on local people. The extra numbers will, the damage, and that comes under public safety. The mud last year was ridiculous, and it wasn't cleared up for weeks and weeks and weeks on end, and not until Councillor Anna Abela followed up on this, and she managed to get it sorted out. But it was weeks for the mud on the carriageway to get cleared up, and some neighbours, at least 2 neighbours, had slipped over on that mud. So that's public safety. And with the weather we've got now, who knows, we could well have rain again, very likely. So that could be an ongoing issue. And again, more people will impact more on the mud. More people in a bigger area will impact more on the mud, and the compaction that will cause more waterlogging as an ongoing thing. Just as I guess other things are, the idling vehicles, the pollution, so more capacity, more people, an extra day will be more vehicles, more generators, more idling vehicles. Even though you have the sign up, last year I had to laugh. The sign up asking people to turn their engines off, and there's a car that came up, the guy got out, ran into the event space, left his car on, and I think I took a picture of it. It was just so ridiculous. I thought, what's the point? What is the point? They just don't care. You talk about your professionalism. I don't call that very, very professional, that your staff don't, adhere to simple things like idling and turning off their engines. Yeah, I suppose my time's running out. But just in conclusion, you talk about in some of the literature mitigating the negative impacts. My experience is you're unable to mitigate the negative impacts, so an extra day will increase the negative impacts in the way I have said. Year on year, the noise levels become unbearable for residents, and the damage to the park, both visible and invisible, intensifies year on year. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Carrie. And the next speaker who put their hand up was Giovanni Ozzi. So Giovanni, sure.
Thank you. Yeah. So I have 5 minutes. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm a local resident. I live on Quernmore Road, which is up the hill, and basically my house becomes like a speaker during wireless and during crank. So the way the sound works, no one's ever come to my house or when I've made sound complaints to check the sound, but I'm quite a way away. So I just want to say that I am, I can give evidence about the sound, and I'll do that this year actually, and I'm quite a way away from the park. So I want to express my strong opposition to Crank Brothers' application. Our park is stolen from locals for 100 days a year now, Finsbury Park, due to events. Crank has 22 of those days in the school holidays. Although we're like anywhere else in London, we have wealthy people living right next to very poor people. We have lots of people in flats without gardens. This park is a central part of their lives. Their kids go there, they picnic there, they like to spend time there in the evenings. events like Crank ruin the park for the summer for them, and they ruin their summers. People who can't go on holiday, who can't escape, who don't have gardens. In terms of community engagement, there's no genuine community engagement. This is all about profit. This is all about turning profit for this company who maybe sort of, thinking they might become like another wireless. It's going to expand. If you allow this expansion year on year, this is going to grow and grow and grow. As a local, I'm forced to avoid the park basically all summer. And how do we know that Crank is not just going to want to keep expanding and ruining our park like on the south side? In terms of crime and disorder, the application for the expansion of Crank is totally undemocratic, as the festival has shown itself to create a large range of antisocial behaviour, drug taking, dealing, thefts. The footpaths turned into a muddy, dark, unsafe and unsanitary passage for people. And there's unacceptably damaging effects on local wildlife. I know we're not supposed to talk about the environment, but, it is having a terrible effect. We already have our park taken over for most of the summer. I've said this. Parents don't want to go to the park when the disruptive festival's on. Families and children feel threatened. Pollution from vehicle fumes, moving vehicles on pathways, generators, diesel generators, creating this perfect storm of high pollutants, endangering children and restricting their activities and what should be fresh air away from the roads surrounding the park. Sadiq Khan is trying to make London cleaner. Diesel generators are left on all day and night. The Cranks, who describe themselves as family men, do not live anywhere near this park. They do not suffer the consequences of this festival they're imposing on us. They would not want anyone near the park when this is going on. They would not want their lives disturbed. Last year, my friends had to accompany 2 girls who were on drugs and frightened by men hanging outside the event space, preying on them, back to the station. It creates a perfect storm of vulnerability, especially young women on drink and drugs from the event. Finsbury Park has suffered a number of rapes and sexual assaults and a murder in recent years. These events make it feel even more unsafe as they're chaotic. Many thousands of people inebriated and on drugs. There's a distinct lack of respect from thousands of people flooding into our park. These are people who don't live in the area. They don't care about our area. The Crank zone becomes a private space in a public park, and it's essentially undemocratic. I just want to read out a testimony. Someone got in touch with me, a local young woman whose grandparents are both housebound and suffer from dementia. She's a local woman, and she got in touch with me on Twitter. She said, this was August 2023. She said, my grandparents are housebound due to their illnesses and they live directly opposite the parks. They can't escape the noise. The shouting and aggressive music affects my grandmother the most. She has dementia and thinks people are being attacked outside and are yelling for help. My granddad doesn't wear his hearing aid and doesn't communicate much, but neither can advocate for themselves. They cannot speak English or use technology. I've been looking after them overnight. So just to know they've been suffering for years. So this is a young woman of colour whose grandparents are directly affected by the events and the noise from events and are deeply frightened and traumatised by what's going on. The sound levels are as bad as wireless or worse. The reverb turns my house into a speaker. The windows shake. I have to close my windows in 40-degree
20
heat.
seconds.
Okay. I have to leave the area as it's too noisy to work. I'm a writer and I work from home. It's totally unbearable. It affects my mental health. It affects thousands of people's mental health. I beg you to look to your consciousness and do not allow this expansion committee, please.
Thank you. Okay, we've got another speaker. So the next speaker is Chloe O'Brien. My camera's not coming on. Yep. So the next speaker is Chloe O'Brien. So Chloe, if you'd like, Chloe, if you'd like to start. Yep. You go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm a trustee for the Friends of Finsbury Park and speaking on behalf of the charity this evening. We strongly oppose the applications made by Crank Brother. As Councillor Dunstall has said, in the few short years that these events have been in the park, they've grown from 2 days of events with a 3,000 person capacity to 5 days of events with 8,000 people a day. And this is despite significant opposition from the community, which expansion has seen greater harm to that community, contrary to the licensing objectives. And echoing what Gio just said, I think we should be very clear that Crank Brother is a business that exists to make profit. It is a rapacious business that has sought year after year to increase that profit. And that's exactly what these applications to vary the existing licenses are seeking to do now. So our objections to the applications are contained in the in our written representations at pages 61 to 67 of the agenda pack. And in the short time allocated, we wish to highlight 2 examples of how these events have impacted the community to date. And we submit that should these applications be granted, these impacts would be further increased well over and above any acceptable level. So firstly, in respect of public nuisance, the noise levels and vibrations from events cause significant distress to residents. This severely impacts individual and community well-being. Numerous complaints are made each year, as we've heard from the 5 councillors who have objected, and the Friends group receive a number of these complaints as well. So Gio read you a particularly shocking complaint, and we've included additional examples in our written submissions. And we really implore the council to consider the effects on the most vulnerable in our society and the local area. So secondly, in respect of harm to children, we received several reports last year from parents of distressed children unable to sleep during events due to the loud music and vibrations which were causing their houses to shake. Children being collected from local summer school clubs on the Friday event reported walking home through antisocial, intimidating crowds of people who are often shouting and consuming alcohol in public. In addition, despite these events reporting to only use 5% of the park, they effectively prevent children and families from enjoying the entire park peacefully and safely due to the large crowds and overwhelming noise. The applicant's statement provides that the basis for these applications are because the events have proved popular and the addition of one event and extra capacity at all events is intended to respond to demand. In reality, in 2023, only 2 of the 5 event days were at capacity, and notably, the Friday was the lowest attended event day at less than 80% capacity. But in any event, it's not for the council to decide applications based on popularity or otherwise. The committee and this council needs to balance the conflicting interests of residents, patrons, and businesses. So we submit that this balance has been tipping further and further with each successive increase, and granting these applications would represent a wholesale imbalance. Haringey Council must protect the quality of life of its residents, particularly the lives of children and the most vulnerable. It's clear from the 50+ representations submitted against these applications and the many hundreds of complaints made during the event period that these events are incredibly disruptive to residents and they cause real, tangible public nuisance and harm to children. This harm and nuisance is occurring already within the current licenses and conditions. Adding an additional event day and further increasing capacity would exacerbate these existing issues and would be wholly disproportionate and inconsistent with the licensing objectives. The addition of another Friday would be particularly disproportionate given that Friday is a work day and in the context of the existing Friday being the lowest attended day last year. So we therefore ask that the authority refuse these applications.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Ms. O'Brien. Okay, so last speaker, Jerry Timlin. Jerry, if you'd like to go ahead. Ms. Timlin?
Sorry. Yeah, my microphone was off. Yeah, I mean, pretty much endorse what's been said so far. I do strongly appeal for the peaceful enjoyment of our homes. Crank Brothers is just accumulating the number of events that impact on local residents. And as another speaker said, there's a lot of vulnerable people who fringe the park and who are unable to escape, people in sheltered housing, people with drug and alcohol issues who are in supported housing, fringe the park. And the general antisocial behaviour that we experience as residents when we're just going about our daily business with people who are inebriated, who don't think it's much of an issue to go and urinate behind a tree near the children's playground. I've witnessed it. Where we've got heavy vehicles coming and going from the park, accessing it and egressing, and onto an already very, very heavily trafficked area. So we're adding to the pollution, we're adding to the congestion, we're adding to issues of safety, where people perhaps with mobility difficulties or who have small children are trying to use the park or go to or from their homes. And especially if in this particular case with expansion to a Friday, when you've got mothers going to collect kids from schools, and then they've already got an infant in a pushchair and another infant by the hand, and they're trying to navigate through these crowds who, many of whom are very well behaved and, you know, perfectly. I mean, I've been to festivals myself, you know, we were all young once, but it's the ones who are misbehaving, who have you know, taken alcohol, and a lot of people do tank up on alcohol before they enter a festival, because inside the event they're going to be paying premium prices. So of course they're going to be drunk before they get there. And so that, you know, reduces inhibition, and therefore you get these issues out on the street and within the park. And I object to it strongly on that basis, but also because of the oppression that we experience with, as I mentioned to Mr. Colvin, having to keep our windows closed when it's a hot day. You can't even sit out if you've got outdoor space, or you certainly can't use the park because you can barely hold a conversation. I also noticed that the council, because of the damage due to heavy vehicles, for these setup and striking the festival framework, they're now putting down patches of bitumen, which in, you know, like even 30 degrees of heat, you sink into. You simply can't walk through. It becomes a sort of a marsh of tar. So these patchworks that have, you know, they're already on the pathways and part of the carriageways, you know, how many more of, you know, how much more of that is the park able to cope with, and how much more cost is it to the council to reinstate that? I know they take some damage costs from the event, the festival organisers, but, you know, what is the gain? Again, I ask that on following someone else's comments. What is the gain for the community? It all seems to be deficit, and that's my bit.
Thank you.
Please don't hold the event.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Tillman. Okay, so please hold on, and we will move on to the next part of the agenda. We'll hand back to the subcommittee. They may have questions for the contributors there. Chair?
Hello, can I hear you? What did you say?
Yeah, so the next part of the meeting, Chair, is questions that the subcommittee may have for the contributors who have just spoken.
Does anyone from the members want to ask any questions of the people you've just heard from? No, I suggest we press on with the contributions.
Sorry, Councillor, I think Councillor Gunas might have a question. Councillor Da Costa has a question.
Okay, well, let's hear them. Councillor Gunas.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, thank you for everyone for presenting their arguments really well. I just wanted to kind of understand a little bit better. Obviously, I think it was Councillor, it was George who mentioned that there's no tangible benefit to the community, to the residents, to the area, but other than benefit being to the, obviously, the event holders. So I just wanted to kind of like what, I mean, obviously the capacity is changing in some ways. It's been increased and it's an additional day that's added to the calendar, events calendar. I just want to understand a bit more, what do you think, in your opinion, would be the impact of that extra day on the residents? And why is it important to all of your residents? Like, you've clearly taken your evening off to present to us, just to sort of like, yeah, what I'm trying to kind of establish is what would be the impact of that one day and a little bit extra capacity on the residents, on the community. And the tangible, that there's no being any benefit, direct benefit for the community.
Is that a question for me directly? I'm happy to respond.
The first part is to you, then the object, it will be, yeah.
Yeah.
Comments
So,
from
I mean,
objectors would be this.
I guess the Finsbury pub would see a roaring trade for the extra day, and we'd probably prop up Manor House Tube as well. That would be good. I think the impact on residents has been quite clearly articulated, and we're proposing to bolt the extra day on there, and it just feels to me unnecessary and unfair in the context of what we've heard. I guess the question about what the tangible benefits for the local community are over and above. So what additional benefit is there from 8,000 to 9,999, keeping it under the major event size? I guess is a question for officers or Crank Brothers particularly, because I'm not clear what there is. To my knowledge, there isn't any. Yeah, so as I said earlier, I would just reiterate that there's a need here for us to strike a balance between running events of this nature and how we treat our residents. And it feels to me like just sort of going from what was 3,000 over 2 days in 2018 to, let's call it 10,000. Give me the extra one in 2024 is a kind of encroachment, and we're not balancing those needs effectively if we do that.
Chair, can I come back with just a follow-up and clarity on a slightly different area? I just want to also establish, obviously, all the representations here are coming from residents who are living in the area. I just wanted to maybe find out if we have any objection from any of the local businesses, or do we have a voice from the local businesses at all in regards to whether this is going to benefit them or not work for them, any kind of representation from the business community. Thanks.
Chair, the only objectors were residents and councillors, and there were no objections from the business community, and there were no objections from the responsible authorities.
Councillor Goodness, are those all your questions? Just I don't want to jump in and jump over you. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I finished. You can go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I didn't want to jump over you there. actually, on that point, Edible Landscapes London were an objector. Is that as a business or is it as an individual who works there? Do we know that? But
It
that's
was both, Chair. It was
Ah,
both. So
okay, cool.
Miss Anderson submitted one in her own right as a resident and also one as the manager owner of Edible Gardens.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. I've got a couple of questions for Chloe, if that's okay. Chloe, you were speaking on behalf of Friends of Finsbury Park. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, perfect. So the applicant mentioned around 60 complaints, and Councillor Dunstall mentioned around approximately the same number as well. And some residents have expressed concerns about actually the challenge in reporting. Do you feel that that number is actually? How do you? Speaking on behalf of Friends of the Palace, not the Palace, of the Park. Apologies. Do you think that it is representative of the complaints you're receiving as Friends of Finsbury Park and the people you're engaging with?
So no, we don't feel that that's representative. At the last Crank Brother residents meeting as well, there were 15 attendees, and they said that the one before that there were only 2 attendees. And we have had really consistent feedback from residents that they have made complaints in previous years that haven't been responded to. They've been, just completely put aside if they are responded to at all. And so, people kind of don't make complaints through these allegedly formal channels anymore, and they don't attend the residents' meetings because it just seems like a farce, is what we're hearing. And the Friends group do receive a number of complaints throughout the event season over and above the numbers stated by Crank Brother.
Thank you. Have you spoken with other friends of other parks that hold large events, for example, Alexandra Park and Palace, about sort of the engagement process or the complaints? And if you have, has there sort of been, do you feel you're sort of getting the same amount of engagement from the organisers?
We haven't spoken to similar friends groups that represent similar park sizes, so not kind of able to answer that question at this stage.
Okay, no problem at all. I mean, the reason why I mentioned Alexandra Park, for example, is it does have a large events program as well, so that's why I sort of asked that question. Okay, thank you very much for that, Chloe. I've got a question for Giovanna, sorry. Giovanna, apologies. Really sorry about that.
Don't worry. It happens all the time. It's part of my life. Don't worry.
It's just I got Giovanna stuck in my head, and then I was like,
Yeah,
I can't remember the.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned the report of the young residents' grandparents.
Yeah.
Which is very concerning, especially for people who have reduced mobility or aren't able to leave house, etc. Do you know, and I can't remember if you mentioned, apologies for this, do you know if she tried to engage on behalf of her grandparents with Crank Brothers and with Vanguard?
I'm not sure. I can ask her because I'm in contact with her. I know she engaged with me on Twitter, so because she knows I'm part of a Haringey Tree Protectors group, grassroots environmental group. But I can certainly ask her. I know she was feeling absolutely desperate and felt that she was just trying to talk to anyone who would listen because her grandparents are in a state of high acute sort of terror while the events are going on. But I can certainly follow up with her and ask her whether I think there's a feeling of desperation and kind of helplessness in the local community. When these events are going on, you feel like you're being pinned to your house and being tortured. And, everyone loves people like music. It doesn't mean we don't want small scale festivals or music events, but I think there's nothing quite like it. If you don't live near a park that holds events all summer, you don't really know what it's like. I mean, I don't know how many of the committee live near Finsbury Park and experience it for themselves, but I would suggest coming down on any day when events are on and actually experiencing the sheer volume and the damage it does to your ears and your house. And, I think that would be quite a sensible move. But yeah, I can certainly follow up with her just on the community line, I mean, I couldn't get through last year, and I was told that when it's busy at the festival at Crank, it will be monitored later, the line, but there was often no one on the line when I tried to call, or it just rang out, or it's engaged. I don't know, really, constantly. So I didn't actually get through to speak to anyone. So it felt very unreliable. The methods of communication and feedback felt meager at best, you know. So, you know, the way it's being presented here by the KC is it sounds like it's a wonderful thing that's happening to us, but actually from a resident's point of view, it's hell, and it's hell in hot weather all summer. And it has to be curtailed in some way. It has to be capped. I mean, morally, it has to be capped. We cannot put profit before people's mental and physical well-being.
So I just want to ask a clarification. So if you call the helpline and it's engaged, there isn't like a whole please hold your number 12 in the list. It's just the phone is engaged.
I mean, I can't remember. I was desperate last year. I called before the event began, actually, and spoke to a very nice young woman who was helpful, but didn't really follow up. But she did tell me, look, while we're really busy, we can't always answer the phone. Basically, she told me that last year. So, you know, it felt very sort of DIY, shall we say, in terms of, you know, it didn't feel very professional as an outfit at all. It felt very much like a startup, which is what it is, trying to expand massively. So, you know, you need to look after the community and allow them to vent their spleen if they need to while events are going on. Not vent their spleen, obviously, but, you know, allowed to complain. But yeah, I found it highly unsatisfactory, the whole feedback process while the event was going on. I tried a few times, but I couldn't get through, so I just gave up.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that.
Sorry,
I've
Chair,
got no further questions, Chair.
Mr. Costa, I wonder if I could address a couple of your questions. I think I might be able to answer them for you. Be allowed?
I believe if Councillor Da Costa would want to ask the questions to you, Ms. Anderson, he is actually permitted to do so. I do believe you are a registered speaker. Yes. I don't know if it's up to Councillor Da Costa.
I mean, I'm just sorry, Naz. Just very quickly, have we? Apologies for this. Have we lost Councillor Rice, or is my screen just acting up?
I think there's a technical issue here. Councillor Rice, give me one moment.
Okay. Apologies, Miss Anderson. In a moment, when we sort out the next item, not item, the current. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Okay, so I think the chair is having some technical difficulties. So I think the committee has no choice but to adjourn at this point, as we're technically inquiring. So we'll adjourn for, I think, so yeah, so we'll adjourn for, I think, 5 minutes. We'll have to take a pause for 5 minutes whilst the chair makes his way back into the meeting room. Hopefully won't take longer than that. So bear with us. It looks like the chair will have to change his computer, so bear with us. Okay, it seems to me that Councillor Rice is going to have to join via phone. So bear with me. I'll bring him in via phone. Just hold on for 1 minute. Okay, Councillor Rice, do you want to say hello to the committee?
Hello to the committee.
Committee, can you hear Councillor Rice?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay. So we've got Councillor Rice via phone. So we were at the section with questions to the contributors, and Councillor Da Costa was in the middle of asking a question, I believe. Councillor, do you want to repeat your last question, or go ahead with your last question? Go ahead with your most recent question.
Yes, I believe that Miss Anderson was going to respond to the question, but I'm not sure which question she was going to respond to, if it was regarding other parks or... Yes, okay. Yeah, she's nodding to that one. So Miss Anderson is going to answer the question. Apologies, it's such a long time ago now.
That's okay. Yeah, just wanted to clarify that we have had lots of dealings with other friends groups, parks friends groups. We don't know how successful they've been in working with the events teams in their park. But what we do know is there's a massive push across the capital from friends groups against the expansion of events in public parks. So I think that that's fair for me to say that. We also know, speaking with the Friends of Ali Pali, that Alexandra Palace had about 21 complaints for the whole of April 23 to January 24. 21 complaints in that whole time. We have found out this evening we've had at least 60 just for the Cranks event. So, you know, the complaints are much, much larger around the Friends of Finsbury Park. And just to reiterate, a lot of people have given up complaining. And one of the main reasons they've given up complaining is that when they go to the community meetings, they get told, we're not breaking sound levels, we're not breaking licensing terms. So they get parroted the same line. So most people have just absolutely given up. So I think the level of complaints is way, way more than is actually probably being delivered to the phone lines. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got no further questions to the objectors, so happy to pass back to the chair.
Chair?
Hello.
So we are up to the... So I don't know if you have any questions for the contributors.
No, I haven't. No.
Okay, so in that case, that leads us on then. I believe Councillor Gunes does not. Councillor, I'm going to check on behalf of the chair. Councillor Gunes, do you have any questions for the objectors?
No, thank you. No further question.
Okay, so that brings us to the next section would be any questions from the applicant to the objectors. Any questions from the applicant?
Thank you. It's not my practice to cross-examine members of the public in licensing hearings. I never do it. They're entitled to come, they're entitled to speak, and it's a democratic hearing. But a number of matters have been raised, which I will try and just reply to as quickly as I can during my closing submission.
Okay, so okay, in that case, then the chair and the licensing subcommittee in general then can move on to the summary. Yes. So then we'll take the summary then from firstly from the licensing officer. If the licensing officer has a summary to make.
Sorry, no, I've got no summary to provide. Thank you.
Okay, then the next speaker then in that case would be Councillor Dunstall.
Hi, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Just I guess a few bits to add. Excuse me. I would just want to reiterate that the proposed expansion and additional day feels like an unnecessary addition to what is an already large events or series of events. The application appears to provide significant gains to the applicant in terms of, ticket sales and everything else that goes along with that, whilst further impacting and providing detriment to local residents in terms of the noise nuisance and public nuisance more broadly in terms of public urination, all of the other issues in relation to that we have discussed. Moreover, I think, as I said, they have 5 event days, 8,000 attendees at each, 5% of the park. We have an obligation here to strike a balance between the use of the park for events of this nature and the desires and needs of residents who live locally and use the park locally, and continually increasing this event from its origins of 3,000 capacity to what is now proposed to be 10,000. Give me the extra one, sorry. Doesn't strike me as us sort of striking that balance appropriately. We have an opportunity to do that, and I would encourage the committee to do that in the context of public nuisance and public safety. All right, thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Carrie Ankle.
Hello?
Hello, Chair.
Can you speak up a bit? Can I hear now?
The next speaker we have is Carrie Ankle.
Yeah, I nothing more to say, but just reiterate what George said. Really, it's unreasonable to extend and expand this event, given the disturbance, public nuisance, and public safety issues.
Thank you. The next speaker is
Hello?
Giovanna.
Sorry, sorry, I'm losing the thread here. So do you want me to make a final comment?
Yeah, so this is the summary part of the meeting. So if
sorry. Okay. Well, I just believe it's undemocratic. I think it disturbs people locally that cannot advocate for themselves. There are lots of poorer communities of colour that live around the park. Pollution levels rise. I think it affects mental health of everyone in the area that has to listen to it. And I just want to, it's an undemocratic further expansion and seizure of our park that has already taken 100 days a year. It'll be 22 or more days that Crank take. It's about greed and profit. And sometimes we have to take the moral stance as business people. We can't always drive and be driven by profit and just making more money and greed. This is not working for the world. We're in a climate emergency, and it's not working for our community and local area. Parks and trees and green spaces are needed more than ever. And I think it makes our park very unsafe for young women. And I do not accept at all the way Crank's lawyer is presenting it as some sort of wonderful addition to our lives locally. The only thing it's doing is lining the pockets of Crank Brother. Okay, that's the bottom line. So just stop, destroying our community, peace of mind. Have some heart, have some moral fibre. Find your backbones and stop expanding.
Okay, and we'll move on to the next speaker, Chloe O'Brien.
Nothing further from me. I just completely echo what Gio and Councillor Dunstall have said today.
And finally, Miss Jerry Timlin. Ms. Timlin, are you there? I don't think we've got Ms. Timlin. So I'll hand back to the chair. Chair, would you like to make the final comment here?
Sorry, we need
I
summing up.
assume the
Sorry,
applicant
the
gets a closing
applicants
submission,
need
does
to
he?
sum up
sorry.
also.
Sorry.
I know I've probably been forgotten about because I've said barely a word for the last hour and 3/4, but I do get the final word. So thank you very much indeed for that. Councillors, can I just start by thanking local residents very much for attending. They're entitled to make representations, they're entitled to present them, and they've done so very well. So I'm grateful to them, and it's given you something to chew on. Can we start just by standing back from this? There are two parts to this application. The first part is an increase in capacity from 8,000 to 9,999. As you've heard, and it's unchallenged now, this produces no increase in noise levels. Again, unchallenged, security, sanitation, infrastructure will increase commensurately, overseen by a safety advisor group, which I've described as highly competent, and again, that is unchallenged. Also unchallenged is that the numbers of people arriving and leaving cause no concern to the police or the transport authorities. And of course, the numbers of people are far fewer than other events which take place in the park, namely Wireless, which is 5 times as big as this. There is no evidence whatsoever that this increase will breach the licensing objectives. Some point has been made about WCs. There will be more WCs. They will be inside the site. They will also be outside the site. And there will be security staff lining the entire egress route to make sure that people are using them and not using trees. So on that topic, you've literally no evidence that the increase is going to be problematic. The second part is the addition of Friday on the first weekend, mirroring the Friday on the second weekend. It's a weekend night. We've been talking about balance. It's a weekend night. It finishes at 10 p.m. All the other conditions on the license and protections in the event management plan remain the same. The SAG oversight remains the same. I'm not going to repeat a word of what I said when I opened the case, but with respect, there's no basis to find that this will be so harmful to the licensing objectives that it ought to be refused. If there were a concern, one of the authorities feeding into this process would have said so. And I just want to remind you of something in my skeleton argument, which is what the National Guidance advises you in 2 different places. Your main advisors on these applications are the responsible authorities. Why? Because they are professionally qualified and appointed to the task, and they are hugely experienced in trying to work out what the correct balance is. And not one of them has had anything to say against these applications. Can I also point out that if you did have concerns on the issue of public nuisance and wants to add some further protection, my client has made a series of promises in the operating schedule at pages 15 to 17, and page 15 in particular has more suggestions on public nuisance, some of which might help to assuage any concerns in relation to public engagement. But let me just turn now to just deal as quickly as I humanly can with some of the points which have been made before you. As the evening has progressed, you've heard quite a lot of annoyance expressed, not about licensing matters at all, but about the fact that the park is let. And that isn't a licensing matter, it's a hiring matter. And it involves your council politically, and it involves your council commercially, but it doesn't involve your council as a licensing authority. Some anger has been expressed about the private use of public space. And you can read about this in the press. There are friends groups who are talking about this in London and elsewhere. And the answer to this, which doesn't concern you tonight, is that councils understand that if they want to keep the grass mowed and the flower beds planted, they need to raise money commercially. Parks increasingly, very sadly, have to wash their face. That's just an economic reality of the nation, but it doesn't affect you. It's been said, well, my client is immoral, it's profit grabbing, it's greedy, it's a business, it's setting out to make profit, as though that's an evil thing. Of course, every applicant who comes before you is hoping to profit from their activities. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing evil about that. And it shouldn't be viewed in that way. And actually, Haringey as a licensing authority doesn't view it in that way. If you look at page 3 of your agenda papers, you'll see your policy is Haringey hosts a number of major commercial events. These events add to the vibrancy of the borough and are enjoyed by both residents and visitors alike. So you understand that these events are enjoyed by people. You know that 18% of people coming to these events are from Haringey and Hackney. That's about 11,000 people are your local residents who are coming to these events. You know that 500 free tickets are given away to neighbours. Of course, they aren't particularly represented by those who've made these strong objections, which to some degree are inspired by political views about how parks should be used, but they exist. And nor have you heard from the many thousands, if not tens of thousands of people who really don't mind about what my client is doing. You're hearing from people who are strongly engaged and involved on the topic, and they are entitled to be. But your policy goes on in the same page to ask about the views of the responsible authorities, and you know what they are, the past compliance history of the current management, you know what that is, the proposed hours of operation finishing at 10 o'clock, 9:30 on Sunday, the type and numbers of customers likely to attend the premises. You know that both the police and SHOSEC are highly satisfied with my client's mature and compliant audience, and whether the applicant is able to demonstrate commitment to a high standard of management, which it is, it has, and it continues to do, and no concern has been expressed on that topic either. So the charge of greed, I'm afraid I must strongly refute. It's not relevant, and I hope is answered by a look at your own policy. Now, can I then just come and deal with some of the specific points which have been made? Councillor Dunstall has made points about the way the event has increased, and he's used arithmetic to say, well, it's increased by an order of magnitude. I mean, if I can tell you that an increase from an event of 100 to 200 is a doubling, but that doesn't mean that you refuse it, because you're not averse to doubling. What you're averse to is breaches of the licensing objectives, and they are not breached here. And similarly, you know that the take of the park is 7%. That means 93% of the park is untaken. He made a point that this reduces access to the park, but reduced access to the park is not a licensing matter. I'm sorry, but it is a hiring matter, which your colleagues in that sort of department will be looking at. It's legally irrelevant. The expansion of a site within the park is not a public nuisance. The allegation is legally irrelevant. And so I totally understand why Councillor Dunstall, representing residents who've spoken to him, would want to make these points, but I'm sorry they are not relevant to you. Points were made, particularly by Gio, about, I'm sorry, I don't know your full name, I apologise, about drug dealing, theft. Points have been made about lack of safety to women, and if all that were verified, corroborated by the police, who are responsible for community safety, or by SHOSEC, who actually patrol, then it would be a point to answer, but it isn't. My client has a zero tolerance to drugs, and there's no suggestion of sexual assaults around this event, none whatsoever. It was also said, well, drunk people are getting in. My client doesn't let drunk people in, and if it was letting drunk people in, your licensing officers would have a lot to say about it. They're there observing what goes on in the parks. All these allegations about intimidation, sexual assault, drug dealing, I'm really sorry, but it's unevidenced, and you ought not to be considering refusing on that ground. It's also said that there's no gain to the community. There's no tangible benefit to the community. There's no need for the events. The people who attend the events, of course, would take issue with that. but it's certainly no part of a licensing function to ask whether there is tangible benefit. But your policy deals with this. The tangible benefit, if it were needed at all, and it isn't, comes in the fact that tens of thousands of Londoners are coming to your park to enjoy these events. And they're also, of course, spending money on transport, and they're spending money in local facilities. That's the benefit, but it's not necessary. It's not part of your consideration. There was a suggestion that the community engagement is a farce. That's really terribly, terribly disappointing to hear. We've set out all the different ways that my client engages, and I'm not going to go through it all, but my client has a professional community liaison officer, which it employs to make sure that there is effective engagement. And there is, because as a result of that community engagement, my client has significantly increased its assistance to disabled people in relation to this event, having a dedicated entrance, having a disabled accessible platform, increasing the disabled toilet provision, and has greatly increased, therefore, the number of wheelchair-bound customers who come to the event and have enjoyed it. It has employed an ecology officer to work with the community and your council's ecology officer on matters of ecology. It has expanded the perimeter in order to protect the ecology, and on and on. My client is engaging, it's listening to the results of the engagement and implementing decisions to the satisfaction of your officers. There's been quite a lot of complaint about inability to get through to my client's complaints line. And this is extraordinary, really, because my client had a community feedback session in January, and nobody said there was difficulty getting through to a complaints line. But 10,000 letters go out with the complaints line on, with an email address. There is an online form. The council has a noise service, including an online noise service and an app where people can complain to, and a level of complaints are received. If despite all of that, there remains an issue, then you ought to mention that, and it will be picked up by the SAG and picked up by my client. The complaints line that my clients operates from 10 a.m. on the day of events all the way through to midnight and is manned through that whole period. So my client utterly refutes the fact that community engagement is insufficient or inadequate. I'm nearly there. I think that's probably all I need to say. I hope that you can get this into perspective. There's an increase of 2,000 people coming to this park. The overall size of this will be a fifth of Wireless. It remains a small event, but it's a highly managed event. It was said my client is a startup. It really isn't a startup. It's now an experienced operator, but it's an experienced operator which uses the best consultants it can get its hands on, and has done so in the case of Vanguardia and Showsec, who are trusted by the royal family, amongst others, to be guarding at their event. I haven't mentioned Mick Bowles, who's on this call, who's probably about the most experienced event safety consultant operating, I'm going to stop now, operating nationally. My client's professionalism will continue for the benefit of this event and in protection of the local community. I'm sorry, I was answering an hour and 3/4 of speeches, and I've done my best to answer them as quickly as I possibly can, but thank you for your indulgence.
Sorry, Mr. Colvin, I was trying to interrupt you to tell you that we'd lost the chair again. So if you just bear with me for a second.
Yes. Do you know when you lost him?
It was just as I was trying to interrupt you, as far as I can see.
Okay. I won't repeat what I've just said then. It was only the last minute or two.
Okay, Councillor Rice, do you want to say hello to the committee again?
Yes, thank you for your contributions. The committee will consider all it heard and come to a decision which will be informed to you within 5 working days.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for attending this evening.
Thank you.